Good afternoon. Welcome to CURT Presents Why Capital Owners Need to Take Ownership of Project Data. I'm Rana Dubrow. I'm the Director of Membership at CURT, and on behalf of our entire staff, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Special thank you to our sponsor, Autodesk, and our participants from Multi-Green Properties. One housekeeping request, please keep your camera off during the webinar. Feel free to utilize the chat box with any questions. We will be providing a recording of this webinar after the event to all who registered. And now, Tanya Wrights, Customer Service Manager with Autodesk.
Hello. Welcome to Why Capital Owners Need to Take Ownership of Their Project Data. So this is an exciting topic that I am pleased to present. And today I will not be alone. You don't have to just listen to me for an hour. We also have Levi and Randy from Multi-Green Properties, which is an exciting customer that I'm excited to introduce here in a little bit. But first, the housekeeping. So if you have questions, please use the chat box. We have held time, quite a bit of time, hopefully around 10 minutes at the end for questions. So we encourage us to be as interactive as we can. Let us get through what we have prepared, and then at the end, throw all the questions, and I will do my best to try to facilitate that. This whole webinar will be recorded, and you will get the recording probably tomorrow. And at the end, there's a survey, so we'd love your feedback. So please look out for that, and don't end without filling out that survey if you can, please. So with that, we can jump right into it. Good morning, good afternoon. Today, I'm going to share a little bit of Autodesk's vision for capital project owners. Then we're going to spotlight an exciting customer that's really embracing that project data ownership and hear about their journey. So first off, a little bit about me. So I'm Tanya Wrights. I'm a customer success manager at Autodesk, specifically in the construction space. So before coming to Autodesk, I spent around 20 years in the commercial construction industry, mostly doing program or portfolio work as an owner's rep. Some of that was working with owners who were really interested in data, and we were doing really cool things around benchmarking contractors and designers and just really trying to standardize because we were doing this program type work. So I bring that experience with me to Autodesk, and my role is to partner with customers to figure out how to leverage technology to achieve their goals. So enough about me. So it's an exciting time in the construction industry, right? We've seen all this growth. There is a tremendous need, as we know, across any sector. But demands and business pressures are also higher than ever. So we've got these increasing pressures and demands. And then we also hear about the challenges that come in on all sides, whether an owner, a GC, a sub, what have you, right? We've all got challenges as we try to execute these projects. And on top of that, we have the tech piece, right? As we're trying to figure out how to harness all that and optimize and be more efficient. So how do we do that? So what's important here is how the industry fragmentation is impacting the outcomes, the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve, right? A typical construction project is made up of multiple teams across all phases of the project, right? Owners, GCs, subcontractors, they're all using different systems and platforms. In fact, about 25% of construction companies use 5 or more different software applications. So we're constantly integrating, trying to figure out how to communicate, and we are creating data, right? We're creating all this data, but what are we doing with it? So communication within a team happens in so many formats, right? About 70% of the global industry is still working from paper-based processes. So that has added a layer of complexity between how we're communicating, right? Design all the way through all these different tools and everybody's proprietary processes. So the fragmentation of data has a huge and direct impact on the project outcomes across all levels. Teams are disconnected. They're working from outdated information because of the multiple apps, or even maybe they're not even digital yet, right? So they're not even able to access that library of things. This is leading to loads of wasted time and even security issues. Because we've got unnecessary people on the job, or we're not controlling who's got access to what. On the project level, the disconnection between the office and the field accounts for massive avoidable rework, which of course affects cost, quality, our schedule, and profitability. And at the business level, unused and lost product data is hugely reducing potential opportunities such as portfolio visibility. So the construction industry is begging for more connection from people to data, and technology plays a key role within this opportunity. So here's our strategy. It consists of 3 pillars. First, digitization. We're fully enabling capital projects for the digital age. It's not about moving off of paper, it's about digitizing processes so our customers can enhance the way information is shared through connected devices, no matter where those teams are. This enables faster and better decisions from a single source of truth. The next step is integrating. To connect all the data, we're breaking down those silos that currently exist between financial, bidding, project management, and operation maintenance systems. That way, our customers can benefit from all of that data generated through the whole life cycle of the project. And finally, we're bringing all that together and capturing critical information. That way, our customers can leverage the data to improve their business, right? You can pull powerful insights and patterns and trends, and even use predictive analytics to try to predict risk. So all of this is covered in what we call the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So this is really our way to push the industry forward and solve a lot of these issues. So what does the cloud consist of? Just at a high level, we've got this bucketed in 4 major areas: design, plan, build, and operate. And we have, through a series of development and also acquisitions, brought together a whole series of best-in-class technologies that can truly support an end-to-end workflow, right? Especially, this is so key as an owner, right? I love this, coming from the owner's background and then seeing where we're going. It finally makes a lot of sense, right? These models are starting to mean something and be actually used through construction and actually used in operations, and it's a super exciting time. So with that data shared across all the phases, now we can use it to inform decisions in design and construction, and also push that into turnover so our facilities teams can have that. We can now analyze the data so we can identify, prioritize, and I mean, my favorite use of it is to not have the same problems recurring on every project, right? If we can figure out why, then we can solve it on the front end, which means it won't keep popping up for us on the back end, and hopefully reducing those change orders. So this is connected construction. And it's really based on this idea of a common data environment, right? This only works when everything's in the same place. And then each player pushes and pulls their specific scope of work, right, into that common data environment layer. So as the owner, you are now empowered at the center of this to actually own your project from concept into operation, and then probably into renovation and back again, right? It becomes a cycle instead of a deliverable that gets put, you know, in the maintenance closet on a shelf somewhere, right? So specifically, I'm talking about BIM, right? BIM is the foundation of our digital transformation, and it's not just a cool model to look at. It's not a visual representation of an asset. It truly is the information piece of the BIM, and that's really where I'm seeing such cool things coming out of our owner space right now as owners get excited about the I in BIM and start to demand it from their contractors. And, you know, the construction site is ready, right? They've been using BIM in some capacity for many years as they do coordination and whatnot. So it's an exciting time, you know, they're ready, and now owners are starting to figure out how to use this data. So with that, enough about me. I am excited to turn it over to our customer speakers. Levi Noss and Randy Norton are from Multi-Green Properties. And actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and a little bit about Multi-Green. So Randy, would you like to start?
Sure. Tanya, can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
Multi-Green Properties started about 2 years ago with this concept of the digitization of everything. We are pivoting out of the data center world and exclusively now focusing on the multifamily property segment, and more importantly, only ground up construction within the multifamily segment. And so from an owner perspective, starting out with the ownership of the plans was key, and getting into the information of those Revit models was key. But more importantly, we wanted to know how to operate our buildings, and the facility management was our number one goal, which gets us into many other aspects of the operations efficiency, the smart home and smart unit perspective, equipment aspects, and capital expenditures. We were trying to compete on analytics from day one, and that's where Levi comes in. So our goal here, Tanya, is to build 40,000 attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled homes by 2030. And to do that, we need to, as an owner, get further involved into the design process and into the supply chain. And BIM is the tool that we are looking to help us do that.
40,000, that's all. Okay. Levi, could you join us and introduce yourself and your role?
Yes, thank you, Tanya. My role at Multi-Green is the Director of Real Estate Development.
Levi, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, not sure what was going on there. So thank you, Tanya, for that introduction there. So my name is Levi Noss. I am the Director of Real Estate Development at Multi-Green Properties. My role is going through and overseeing the planning process, design, pre-construction, and construction activities, specifically looking into the planning process of feasibility studies, test fit scenarios, all using the power of BIM, pushing that out into a design collaborative process with our consultants, using a design catalog with pre-engineered models and data sets, and then taking that into our pre-construction for rapid estimating and further analyzing what is going to be the best capital investment. And then moving onward into the construction activities, where we look at leveraging digital engineering for lean construction processes. And in addition to all that, responsible for creating that lean culture on the job site. So Randy does a lot internally with our business. Out at the job site, we really got to bring everybody up to speed into utilizing the types of technology stack that we're looking to use. My background has been 20 years in the construction field, doing design management, project management on various projects such as hospitals, hotels, stadiums. One of the things that led me into getting more involved with Multi-Green, I was working with a home builder doing about 5,000 homes out there and looking at their vertical integration and delivery. So in about 5 of those years, I sat as lean construction director of Australasia, where we got to explore with the different universities out there in digital engineering tools with BIM and VDC, and everything getting prepped up in a operation readiness platform where we're eliminating all paper and leveraging as many lean processes as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you guys. So the first topic here is, tell me why data ownership matters. Randy, let's start with you.
Well, coming from the data center business, we understand the value of data. And 10 years from now, there's a very real scenario, Tanya, that the very most valuable asset that we have on our balance sheet is data. So right now, we don't even know how to capture it all. We don't even know how to store it all. We're creating data lakes, all for the future benefit of our company. But what we do know is that we have access to this data, and we're going to start capturing the data. And in fact, our very next hire is going to be a data scientist to help us understand what this data actually is. But when you fast forward, 5 or 10 years from now, Tanya, and we have 40,000 units across the United States, to have a standardized reporting system, a standardized supply chain, understanding, what information and objects we put into these buildings 10 years earlier, when it starts coming to warranties, it's going to matter. And when we are thinking about future-proofing these assets and future CapEx, we want to know exactly what we put into these buildings. Data just doesn't stop at the construction. Data, we view this as a digital twin, and the entire digital infrastructure of these campuses we are owning. So, there's a lot of services that we're going to be providing to our residents that we otherwise could not have done or anticipated had we not designed it in a digital first world. So why data matters to us is because we want to compete on analytics. Look, right now, we're having $5 to $7 million capital calls, change orders left and right because of the cost increase of lumber and steel and labor. That is unacceptable. And we need to contract better. We need to control the contracting environment better. And from an owner, if we're really going to build 40,000 units, we need the analytics and the insight to do this. So it all starts with the information embedded in the BIM model.
Levi, anything to add there?
Absolutely. So why data ownership matters, just as Randy said, we want to make sure that we're aggregating all the data so that we can understand how these facilities are performing, how they're being utilized, how they're being built. And that gets into where we're not just looking at the ownership of all the data, but we're also going in and we're controlling how that data gets entered in and by whom. At the end of the day, we want to understand a readable format of all the data that's standardized across all of our projects. So it's easier for us to go in and run our analytics. We want to understand that, if there is a particular piece of equipment that's put into these facilities and it fails, is it the equipment or is it the installation? And we can start understanding that when we begin to capture all this data as things are being commissioned and installed, and we get into, I mentioned operation readiness. Too often we get boxes and boxes of paper that with O&Ms, warranties, they sit in a warehouse and that's the handover today. Well, that doesn't work in real world scenarios. When we're given the keys, we open up the doors and something goes wrong. We need this information at our fingertips that is easily and quickly attainable so that we can correct things at a moment's notice. But importantly, going into that continuous improvement for future builds. So when we can understand better what the market demands are and anticipate new demands coming in to play, such as, if there's a pandemic, if there's new technologies that people are expecting in their lifestyle, if there is other sustainability technologies out there, we want to be able to aggregate this data and have the foresight so that we can actually improve our products at every build.
And I just want to continue on that statement, Levi. There's things that we would be precluded from doing in the future as an owner if we didn't care about the data during the pre-design process. I can't tell you how many times as an owner over the last 30 years, we couldn't get information even if we asked for it. We were locked out of Procore, or vendors were holding us hostage for final documents because they wanted to get an extra several $100,000 of payment. That ends. We are going to have all, design contractors design in our instance. We're going to control the outcome. And we think that it's going to be much more efficient for everybody. And if we want to get better at design build, or even eventually into IPD, anything prefab, precast, modular, we need to know the data and have the data to make those decisions. This is all about capital budgeting and very large capital projects. If airports are requiring it, and airlines are requiring it, why shouldn't real estate? These are all 100 million, multi-billion-dollar projects. And as an owner, typically it's been the tail wagging the dog, meaning the general contractors and the subs telling us what to do. And Tanya, we just want the property to operate the way we designed it to. And finally, allowing the owner to be involved in the construction cloud is enabling us to do that.
Really good point you're making there, Randy. When we sit there and we get the data today, if we're not creating that transparency across the board with the team and being the owner that's driving that, we get sanitized data and we don't get the full picture. It also breaks down, creates those silos between the teams when you are getting sanitized data, because the team is there to help collaborate and create the solution as one team. And when you're starting to get sanitized data, you're only getting part of that picture and you're not necessarily getting the right solution. And for us as an owner, we want to be implementing target value production processes where, we create a bit of a budget, and that way we know what sort of expenditure we're going to have on a project, but also we want to be able to control what's happening in the design. If we have design elements that are being put out there that we're not aware of, then that can increase our budget unknowingly. So again, bringing that all into the environment during that design process, during that pre-construction process, go through scenarios of test fit and what ifs, and really have a full IPD type environment. Now, we may not always contract that way, but certainly those are the contracting mechanism is what's going to help bind those relationships. And in every project, we'll always have a collaborative environment that has the level of transparency. So we get multiple views on a problem, and ideally multiple solutions brought to that problem there.
One last thing, Tanya, and we can go on to the next slide. If we're to build 40,000 units over the next 8.5 years, that's going to be a non-linear curve. That means we need to double production almost on an annual basis. And we can't make business decisions without the data. So we're just asking our vendors and our design consultants, help us, help you. We will do more business together in an ecosystem of transparency. And we're very excited about what this new solution is enabling us to do. We've tried all of the software solutions out there, Tanya, with a lot of switching cost. And we're very opportunistic and excited about having one single source of truth now. Finally, here we are in the 2020s. I think this is going to be the century for ownership.
Well, thank you guys. That was great. Let me click over to the next one. So data is clearly important. How have you leveraged that data to start to affect your decision making?
Levi, why don't you take lead on this?
Okay, sure. So in part of that, I spoke a little bit about target value production, and that's really coming up with a detailed budget, not necessarily an estimate, but a detailed budget of the different building elements that we actually want to spend money on, whether that's low voltage with smart devices, or that's a cogen facility put on the site. But also, what are we spending on glazing? That starts to get into a little bit of our procurement and supply chain methodology. That if we know we're going to be doing 40,000 units over the next 10 years, well, we can share that data with our suppliers and go through and create an agreement to state that we're going to be ordering hundreds of thousands of these windows, these low E windows. Why don't we look at how can we bring more value down to our customer? Because we really are trying to do something that's sustainable, that is attainable for the workforce that's out there. So that's one of the smart and positive outcomes within all that. And at the end of the day, when we are able to have this full transparency, a pre-engineered model that gets out there before the site, we reduce our financial risk and the errors that do occur out there on site, including any of the scope gaps that we may have. If we're able to sit there and have full transparency in a 3D visualized model that is able to produce our documentation, produces our quantities of materials, and breaks down into the specific trade packages, then you start eliminating all the questions, and you're no longer generating as many RFIs on the project. So we really want to get to that speed to build. As Randy mentioned, we're having to double production, over the next several years, and each year. And the only way we can do that is by working with our partners, working with our prefabricators, working with our designers in a pre-engineered solution and catalog that we can provide each of the consultants and builders, and come up to find out what is going to be the best fit for these different sites that we pick out.
I would just add to that, if facility management and operation readiness is our goal as an owner, then it comes down to making smarter decisions and continuous improvement during each phase of the process. But if I had to just say one or two things, Tanya, of some of our positive outcomes, it goes down to even the selection of our architect and our general contractor and our design consultants. When we get into the contract environment and we know what the outcome needs to be, and everyone wants to help us get there, it really eliminates the RFP process, or even the selection process for who we want to work with in any given region or MSA. Not every design consultant, general contractor, or subcontractor wants to play in this environment, but those that do are helping us tremendously, and they go to the short list of who we want to work with.
Yeah.
And if there's significant cost savings that have already happened in the consolidation of our technology stack. Just one smarter outcome is our subscription costs have almost gone down in half.
By not having everyone
bit.
having 5 different apps that, yeah.
That don't interoperate, none of them communicate with each other.
Yeah.
We've been able to,
That's
not staff up as many people as we would have otherwise been required to do. There's many smarter decisions that happen when you have better data and better control of the instance of the environment that is being designed in.
definitely working more efficiently, going in, and as we have all these different platforms, as you mentioned earlier, Tanya, up to 5, 7, depending on your estimating teams, they may have a preferred product. You may have your design teams have their preferred product. When we can really, as Randy alluded to, work with the design and building teams to adopt the tools that we are suggesting, then everybody is able to work a little bit better together. And rather than having what I'd like to call Chinese whispers, where you're trying to work from one platform, translate that into another platform, it starts to get messy, and you start losing a lot of the data integrity and the intelligence that you're creating throughout the project. So, and getting into that, we look at also taking the cities along for this type of journey as well. With this type of platform and the collaboration that we have, we're bringing to them a better story, and through that journey, which shortens down our time for the speed to build. We don't want to get hung up on their questions. We'd rather have everything presented, ready to go, With the models these days, we can go in and add in all the construction codes and test that and make sure that everything is compliant, rather than get to the city and you kind of sit back and wait a little bit and maybe it's compliant, maybe it's not, and then they give you a full list. Our goal is to go to them, have that relationship, and give them the confidence that what we are providing to them is already compliant. And all we're looking at is what additional amenities or things that we need to connect to in the environment or the neighborhoods.
Especially when you're doing a multi-phased project. For example, we won't go into any MSA unless we have at least 1,000 units for economies of scale. Well, that might take us 3 or 4 phases to get through that, Tanya. By the time we're on the second phase, the cities are working with this in a much quicker environment. The turnaround time is almost cut in half. Of course, there's your statutory requirements and wait periods and minimum turnaround times. But when commentary can happen within the federated model that's submitted to the city, that's just a whole nother process that can be automated and which will reduce the regulatory environment to help us get to construction quicker.
And I heard you say cut permit review time down by half. That's, I hope
in
everyone
one
is
city in
listening.
particular, we're seeing that, and we're hoping we can do that in other cities that we've identified. And these cities are asking for it. And in some instances, they're expecting it.
That's awesome. You know what? That is a great segue. I think our next topic, if I can get my slides to cooperate. Nope. There we go. So 40,000 properties by 2030. That's a huge initiative. And I've heard you allude to this. I just would like to tackle it directly here. Scaling is key, right? And I think what I heard, or what I'm projecting on you all, is that feedback loop is key. Whether we're talking about estimating or design components or even construction issues you're finding in the field, it's important to get that pushed back to the front end so that you can, that the per unit time decreases, right? So that you can get that the scaling as you described. So do I have that right? Anything else you want to add here about this initiative in particular?
Well, just a couple of other non-design data points. We're just trying to prove to the world that this can be done. We think that along the way, we're going to get more efficient, that our cost per unit and cost per square foot is going to go down over time, all else being equal. We think that we're going to obviously reduce many of those waste figures that you put up at the very beginning, whether that was time, labor, or materials. We think our financing is going to get better, both on the construction financing as well as the permanent financing. We're going to be able to implement more sustainable initiatives, which will also give us not only more operational efficiency, but better permanent financing efficiency. Our insurance costs are going to go down. It's going to be, if you can build 40,000 units, you can certainly do 80,000. If you can do 80,000, you can do more. We want to be as open source about this, Tanya, as possible, and be a thought leader in the space and help other owners follow or collaborate with us. We are going to be totally open source and transparent about this, almost like a public service announcement would be. We're going to share all of our research and data findings to the public through what we're writing up as green papers. And we just think that as a whole, the industry needs a push. And what we're claiming to do or aspiring to do, Tanya, I think will become the norm 10 years from now. And why 40,000 units? Well, depending on if you're talking to Fannie or Freddie, or if you're looking at the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, there's a deficiency of homes here somewhere between 3.8 million and 4.8 million. And we were just trying to solve for 1% of the needed supply. And that does not include any of the dilapidated or housing stock that should be not accounted for, that is pre-1940s or pre-1930s type housing stock. The number is far greater than 4.8 million. And we need the construction industry to step up its production to be able to bring back some of these demand and supply metrics back to equilibrium, which benefits all of society. So at the end of the day, what this really is, Tanya, is stakeholder capitalism, where the equity owners, the lenders, the residents, the general contractors and subcontractors, the city and the communities are all collectively responsible for the outcome of our environment. And that's really the giant case study that we're trying to prove over this decade.
I love it.
I'll add to that just a little bit there, Randy and Tanya. Earlier this morning, I had somebody ask me, well, if you're doing 40,000 units, they're all going to just look the same. And they're not. So what the strategy is here for us is we're going in and we're creating unit types that are pre-engineered and giving those unit types, whether it's 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and it ends up being a catalog back to the designers. And then they're able to go in and fit it similar to a Tetris piece out there on the site for whatever the unit mix and the volume that we need. And they get skinned appropriately for whatever the region, local area is. In addition to that, if we get this model improved and we start looking at a speed to build with prefabrication modularization, as we're starting to spit this out, we can reduce our cost because of our volume of how many builds we'll do in a particular area. And really, as Randy said, we're only hitting 1%, if not less than that, of the demand. We've just gone through a pandemic, production has been slow. And really, in my view, there's nothing more noble than to provide people homes, not just housing, a place that they are comfortable in their environment, that they are proud to live there with their families, that is meeting all the lifestyle and sustainable requirements that we should have today in every home. So really getting in there and, 40,000, I would love us to do 80,000 in 10 years. But that really comes down to finding good partners to work with, finding a good production system that is suitable for the particular area, where that's flat pack, panelization, prefabrication, all getting to that speed to build, and really the relationships and understanding with our stakeholders in the design, the cities, and the building teams.
And Tanya, if there was anybody on this call or anybody that listens to this recording afterwards and they say, hey, I want to make a difference in my community, MultiGreen, can you come here and build us 1,000 or 2,000 units? That's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for landowners or land developers that are looking for our expertise, our flag, and our brand. And, just like the Marriotts of the world or Extra Space Storage, we think that our multifamily product will be a very specific niche, tailored to a very specific targeted consumer group. And it's the essential workforce. It's the firefighters, the teachers, the police officers, the very people that got us through this pandemic. And in many instances, they have better credit than you or I. They drive better cars than you or I, but are being priced out of that entry-level home that just so happens to be $400,000 or more in any one of the given 12 MSAs that we've identified. We need to be there for them. They were there for us.
Well said. I don't think we can improve on that. So you mentioned at the beginning about you're looking 10 years out and trying to predict where you'll be at, where the industry will be at, what will be valuable, and that data is core to it. So if you could expand just a little bit more on your long-term strategy of data beyond the initiative we were just speaking about.
Levi, maybe I'll take lead from an ownership and a facility management and operations perspective, and you can take lead on the construction side. So from a long-term data strategy, we know that there is going to be a lot of benefits that come from owning a real estate asset, specifically for a consumer. We are even as bold as to say that we're going to coin a phrase called building as a service. I think others have said it in the past, but there are going to be many conveniences and amenities, digital amenities that are expected and required of our resident that can only be provided by having data to act upon. We also think that future appraisals 5 or 10 years from now are going to be very specific about digital amenities. And I think that future ratings on Google, maybe there's going to be an app out there where you can rate the building, whether it's an office building, a restaurant, or a multifamily pad, according to its digital amenities. Maybe you can even start selling some of those digital amenities to the consumer or to the retail marketplace. And maybe you can even start subleasing these multifamily units out to weekly, daily, or other type rentals. And maybe you're starting to see other digital devices, Internet of Things that come to enhance and even provide additional ancillary revenue to these buildings. So data is going to exponentially drive the value of these assets, whether it's the top line revenue or the terminal value cap rate. And that's why data is so important to us. If you look at the Stanford Global Project Center, they've been advocates of really advancing sustainability and data for a very long time. And Ashby Monk is one of my heroes. He's a finance superhero. And he wrote a book called The Technologized Investor. And it's a derivative of The Intelligent Investor that Ben Graham wrote. And it essentially said, as investors and as owners, you need to really look at spending that money that you would otherwise spend on a third party software provider or software engineer, and reinvest that in your company. And with Autodesk and the Revit model and the eventual digital twin, which is going to allow us to create an operating system for these buildings, it's going to allow us to leverage the data that we have. And we think that the data on our properties is going to increase the value of the properties somewhere between 100 and 200 basis points, whether that is from just the data itself, the sustainable materials that we can report on, whether it is operational efficiencies or cheaper permanent financing. And that's the reason why we are so bullish on the long-term data strategy here at Multi-Green Properties.
Levi, you're muted.
There we go. I'll add to that, Randy. We mentioned digital twin, and I'll talk a little bit about what digital twin means for Multi-Green. Not just going in and having a 3D asset that is sitting in the computer that has data connected to it, but also sensing data. How much power are these facilities consuming? What's the data that's being consumed? Where are the areas of these facilities being utilized? Are they using the pool? Are they using the clubhouse? Are they using the temporary office spaces? We're now living in near a post-pandemic sort of scenario. And during this whole time, everybody had to go and start working from home. A good majority of us had to work from home. Well, while the offices are all shut down, we now have increased power consumption. We now have increased needed space to work at home. Some of us are at our kitchen table. Some are just sitting on the bed with the laptop. So understanding how the different spaces get utilized, how the building performs, that really begins to start pouring into our AI with this digital twin and better provide for future needs and future uses, which allows us to understand also, if these buildings are requiring more energy, well, then it does make a lot of sense to go in and provide a cogen type scenario for these so we can lower the cost of energy. Most energy to get to your home from the power plant is, 3 parts. So every dollar you're spending, you're only getting 33 cents of energy. And when you have on-site energy production, you're getting 90 cents on the dollar. So we're able to provide more and give the amenities that these people really need. In addition, with the big data here, we're looking for just continuously improving. You look at the car manufacturing industry, every year they come out with a new model with new features. So going in and understanding what's happening with the market. You know, if lumber goes up in costs again, and we can anticipate that through trending data, we have other solutions out there such as IFC and other things we can build with as well. So really, the more data we can aggregate, we can analyze and provide better homes for everyone.
All right, I'm going to move us along to tips for getting started. So let's say everybody on this call is fired up. All right, let's do it. Go data. I want to do all the things. So what do I do? But where do I start?
Levi, can I start on this one? And because I
Go
know
right
you'll
ahead.
finish up really well. You really have to have a commitment to this from the ownership side. You have to have your ownership buy in on it, because there's going to be pursuit costs lost. There's going to be switching costs made. It's going to take a few iterations for you to decide what your technology map looks like. And then you're going to have a lot of kickback or negative feedback from people on the ground that don't believe, you know, in this idea of working collaboratively or inside of the construction cloud. You know, there's a lot of software tools out there, but what's really great from an owner's perspective, Tanya, is you can require it. So it's a contractual requirement. And if you want to work with us, if you want to do this $100 million project, or if you want to do, you know, $1 billion with us over the next 10 years in this one given MSA, then you're going to do it our way. And so having that conviction, and then obviously, you know, you're going to make mistakes. For us, this was a 4-year journey to really land and tie in all of the APIs behind the scene and get properly staffed. But then it is bringing on the right professionals, a guy like Levi, you know, a world-class BIM, VDC, large capital project manager that can be the interface to the general contractors and subs and design consultants to give them the coaching and the nudging to help them along the way. After the first project, it is so fun. It is so easy. And all of the hard work pays off. But this was a multi-million-dollar 4-year commitment on the multi-green team part. Many of those costs will not be recovered.
I'll add to that. And Randy, you've alluded to, you know, grabbing the expertise within your team. You know, if you don't have the expertise of doing digital engineering or digital delivery for your projects, then I highly recommend going out and working with a digital engineering partner that has construction experience. They are hard to find, but you want to definitely find somebody who's been vetted through that construction field as a partner to bring in, and using this type of technology that enhances productivity out there on site, that being the primary goal. And as that they begin to come into your own company and your own businesses, you're going to have to get prepared for a cultural shift. You know, we've been doing things for a very long time in a particular way, you know, just traditional build. And there hasn't been a lot of technology integration into that process because of a little bit of a pushback. And some of that is due to we've got the silver foxes out there that's been doing things for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and they're comfortable with that. And then you have the guys coming out of college that, you know, they've got every device in their pocket that you can imagine, and they want to try to exploit that. Marrying those up together, you need somebody that can act as a custodian, taking responsibility, building that culture. My hat tips off to Randy building that culture here at Multigreen and finding the right people and to work with. Getting out there on site, again, needing somebody that can coach all the trades and the builders out there. You know, they still very much stuck into a linear process and not a dynamic process with this type of technology.
Yeah, and Levi, this doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar 4-year project like it was for Multigreen. It just turned out to be that way because we are trying to do it at scale. and the size of our projects, basically required it. But I think the simplest way to get started, Tanya, to answer your question, is probably like an owner's rep or a design assist expert that has expertise in BIM. I think you need to contract that person early on, from day one, time zero, and have a budget for it. And I don't know what that budget might be. It could be $100,000 to $500,000, depending on the size of your project. But have something there, and then you can develop your policies and procedures, your BIM execution strategy, and eventually internalize it and standardize it and have it become an owner program requirement or a design guideline requirement as you eventually become more involved in that specific trade. At Multi-Green, we're not trying to self-perform everything. We're just trying to self-perform the management of risk. And that requires us to get very involved in the technology map, and as an owner, taking over the technology map from the very get-go. Just like any accounting system or an operating system, we are planning for that facility management and operation readiness from day one.
Well, guys, I learned a lot. I took notes, and I even knew kind of what you were going to say. So thank you very much for your time. And I just want to, it's Zoom, so I feel the need to have a slide, right? So here's a closing slide, and I just want to touch on a few things that you said. So take ownership as the owner, right? That's so key. I think we think of a project and we forget that the owner, it was their idea in the first place. They have to deal with it for 30 years, 100 years, whatever we're designing for. The contractor team, even the design team, is only there for a year or so. So why should they dictate to us what we're doing, right? I think a lot of owners, especially in these big projects, it's an overwhelming responsibility sometimes to dictate the technology or ask for what you want. And you can defer to recommendations from other players, which is fine, and in some cases might be the right idea or the right answer, but it might not also. So if you're serious about this journey to data, you need to be serious all the way through. You need to be serious on your big projects. You need to be serious on your small projects. I love when people say we're doing BIM, like, what does that even mean, right? So are you doing all the BIM or some of the BIM? Do you only care about, doors or air handlers? Or, you got to figure out what it is that you care about and then manage that. And then of course, expand and project and do all the things, right? So I think that there's a ton of great tips in here. And just to kind of, this slide here, remember in design, there's a whole host of opportunity to standardize, especially if we're talking about serial owners here, right? To standardize what you're asking for and to create a mechanism where you can feed back, call it a prototype or, standard details or whatever you want to call it. But as we all know, affecting design is much cheaper than changing it later, right? And I would guess for you all, if you're going to have so many units out there, having less unique situations would be better to manage when we check in 10 years, right? So controlling that design side will just save all the way down, right? And then change management. I've spent a lot of my time personally in here of trying to make things the same-ish and controlling costs so that you're just not, the scope creep is real, right? So having everything in one tool really allows you to understand what is changing and why, and control and make sure that you're not having a different experience based on different vendors in different areas of the country or whatnot. The next point, I would really argue in my own personal experience that having repeatable processes encourages confidence and profitability of your whole team, design, construction, whatnot. So your contractors and your vendors are excited to work on your projects because they know exactly what's expected. It's either, hopefully it's written down, but it's very repeatable. And then they're excited to work on this over and over repeat work, which is just fundamental to doing a scaling project like this. Quality management, of course, we want everything built right. And we talked about closeout a lot, but some projects I would argue maybe never get closed out, right? We're dragging on and on and on and on, and the owner maybe never gets what they wanted, right? So with that, we have time for just a couple questions. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. But I have one for you, Levi. Earlier, you mentioned sanitized data. Can you give me an example or tell me what you mean by what you said?
Yeah, so, sitting on the building side, I'll tell from my own experience of, as the builder, giving sanitized data to the owner. If we have a particular issue that's out on the project site, and let's say it's a change order that we're getting ready to prepare, and it's going to end up causing delays or whatnot, because we've got to remove the material offsite, whether it's a door frame or a particular piece of equipment. All the owner might get is a notice of delay, equipment failure. Well, why did the equipment fail? Was it the supplier issue? Was it installed wrong? That really begins to create a problem for the owner, because he can't make the best decision in correcting it early on. He's got to wait, however long it's going to take for the building team to come back to them with what their solution is, rather than letting the owner and the rest of the team become part of that solution. Mm-hmm. In addition to, you get sanitized data from the consulting team during the design process. Rather than working in a collaborative environment, the architect may go in and only publish his current design, but at the meantime, he's going in and he's changing window sizes, or he's changing, hallways. And the structural engineer is, he's only working with what he has. So now he has to go back and rework everything he gets once the architect publishes it. When we're working in a collaborative environment, we're publishing on a regular basis, rather than having rework, or having, even worse, having the engineering team do no work and just wait until the architect is finished. We can actually see what is being designed, come up with the creative solution, and vice versa. Structural engineers, they may go in, see the window and go, well, I'll tell everyone I'm going to put in a bigger beam later. And then when the big beam comes in, well, now we realize we can't put in the window that we want. So there's a whole different stories out there of type of sanitized data, but it's really being as transparent as we possibly can, so that we have a full team that's working together and providing a solution. I'll give just one last example of sanitized data, which is probably the worst for the owner, and I know we're running out of time here, is when we get through a handover process, we don't always get to see all the RFIs, the installation, all the issues that went into that handover. We only get the final documents of O&Ms, warranties. We don't have a record of how that was built and what issues were there, which later on comes into legacy if there was something behind a wall that failed and needed to be repaired. So I'll leave you at that.
Absolutely. Yeah. What was installed, but maybe it will be relevant. What sub installed it? Maybe it's not the equipment, it was the installer. So thank you guys so much. I learned so much, and we're a minute over time. So Rana, please.
Thank you, Tanya and Levi and Randy, for a very informative webinar. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us at the next CURT webinar. This one is going to be on sustainability in construction. It will be held on June the 29th at 2:00 Eastern Time. You can register for this event and others at curtevents.com, or contact me, as I've mentioned in the chat box. Have a great rest of your afternoon. And thank you again.